For those of you who I have not met, my name is Ari. I'm the Vroom Coordinator for the state of Oregon. I work for the Early Learning Division under the Department of Education, and specifically our job is to provide resources and programs for parents of children ages 0 to 5. So we work with the really young kids, and I am the Vroom Coordinator, so I'm going to be speaking specifically about Vroom today. And we should have some members of our pilot sites on the call, as well as some ELD staff, and then just some other folks that are interested in Vroom. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I have just sort of a basic agenda that I'm going to walk through and some sort of key goals that I'd like us to achieve. But my agenda is pretty simple. I'd like to talk about the basics of Vroom and what the program is, and give you guys a national look at what's happening around the country related to Vroom. Then talking about Vroom specifically in Oregon and what ELD, the Early Learning Division, is doing to get it out there, and what our strategy has been. Then jump into the science of Vroom itself, sort of the key principles that went into its development. Then we'll talk about what Vroom looks like, and this could be, this is the materials, this is the activities, the tips that make up Vroom. And from there, we'll talk about Vroom in the community and share a couple of examples. Some of our case studies will be our current pilot sites, and I know that Central Oregon is on the line. We're going to use you guys as an example. I hope you're okay with that. I'm sure you're okay with that. And then lastly, we'll talk about discussing Vroom with parents and caregivers and some sort of key talking points and points of discussion that I use when working directly with parents, and hopefully they'll be helpful. The three objectives that I'm hoping to achieve today are that at the conclusion of this training, everyone will be able to be, one, familiar with the Vroom resource and its value to parents and caregivers as a tool for brain building. So sort of the simple basics of what Vroom is and the materials that are available, and how they could positively impact the lives of families here in Oregon. Number two, understanding the scientific principles that contributed to the creation of Vroom. And full disclosure, I am not a neuroscientist, so today we're going to focus really on those sort of basic foundational pieces of Vroom, including the concept of serve and return and back and forth interaction between a parent and a child, and how that contributes to healthy cognitive development. And lastly, we'll talk about how Vroom can be promoted in your community. Now, the purpose of this training is, there are multiple sort of purposes here, and because the audience is diverse, we're really going to stay high level here. So this is for our pilot sites that are either just starting or have been going for a while. People that work in the licensing group here at the ELD, as well as just anyone who's generally interested in Vroom and promoting it in their community. So if there's material that you've already seen, I apologize, and just bear with me, and hopefully there'll be something new in here for everybody. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, if you have any questions, submit them in the questions or chat box on your screen, or send me an email and we'll get to them at the end. But so far it seems like everyone can see my screen and hear me just fine. So starting with the basics of Vroom. What is Vroom? Simply put, Vroom is a national early learning initiative that empowers parents to turn everyday activities into brain-building moments with their kids. Vroom is more than just what's happening in Oregon, and I'll talk about that in a sec, but it's based in the latest science, and that's the science of infant brain development, and is designed to fit into parents' existing routines. Vroom is a series of tips and activities. So these activities that parents can do with their kids are meant to be layered onto what they're already doing. They're meant to be additive, and they can be accessed via the free smartphone app or other free materials that are available in both English and Spanish. So simply put, Vroom is a series of more than 1,000 activities, brain-building activities that parents can do with their kids that are based in the latest neuroscience and made available through these free tools. So it's both the smartphone app and other materials that can be downloaded and printed for free from the Vroom website, which is joinvroom.org. There's a materials page and a Dropbox folder where all of this stuff can be printed. So if you're interested in, if you're a pilot site or you're just an individual, there are a number of ways that you can get access to these materials free of charge, and I would recommend checking out the joinvroom.org website to do exactly that. So the Early Learning Division, my group, has partnered with the Bezos Family Foundation, and they're the folks behind Amazon.com to launch Vroom in Oregon. They were the creators of Vroom. And Oregon is one of a number of states to partner with the foundation in this effort. So we are joining Washington, California, Colorado, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, New Hampshire, I believe Montana just joined, and a few other communities to promote Vroom. And Oregon is unique in that we are the first statewide Vroom rollout. All these other places are promoting Vroom on a sort of community level or just regionally, but we are statewide, and we are the first to do so. The first pilot site was up in King County, where Amazon is headquartered, and they did a launch up there before sort of spreading out. So I want you guys to think of Vroom as more than just what's happening in Oregon. It's really part of a national initiative to emphasize the importance of those first 5 years of a child's life and the importance of brain building and this brain building science. A few things that the Bezos Family Foundation is doing is on the national scene includes some really interesting stuff around packaging. So you might have seen some news stories about this, but Vroom, the Bezos Family Foundation has a partnership with Johnson & Johnson, and as you'll see their tips and Vroom ads and activities on Johnson & Johnson products on the national scene rolling out soon. They're doing other interesting stuff around packaging on meals and in grocery stores, that sort of thing. So they're thinking nationally and beyond, but you know, we're going to today focus mainly on what's happening in Oregon, but I do want to stress that we're not alone in this effort. It's really a national initiative, and it's really starting to take off. So the Bezos Family Foundation did an interesting process when it came to developing the Vroom tool. And they put out ads in Craigslist and other places, you know, paper ads on telephone poles to recruit parents for a number of discussion groups. And they solicited feedback from those parents on how to reach families with young kids, how to talk about brain-building science, and that sort of thing. And then they coupled that with input from leaders in a bunch of fields, including neuroscience, child development, behavioral economics, and others. And really the development team is some of the best sort of and most well-known minds in these fields, including professors from Harvard University, University of Washington, and then some local folks at Oregon State University. In fact, Ellen Galinsky, who wrote Mind in the Making, one of sort of very well-known thinkers in this field, was the sort of the chief scientific advisor for the Bezos Family Foundation on this project. So through these discussions with parents and with scientists, they developed a series of key principles that they felt would be effective in helping them reach and create resonance with their target audience, and that's parents and caregivers of children in that age group, 0 to 5. So I'm going to walk through these key principles which really infuse every aspect of Vroom. And we start with withholding judgment. So Vroom and its tips and activities are meant to be positive in nature. They're not corrective. They're not meant to scold parents or tell them what they're doing wrong. They're meant to be additive and positive in nature. Speaking in the voice of their peers. So Vroom takes into account the realities of parents' lives, and one of them being that parents are incredibly busy. So you'll see that a lot of the Vroom activities, they can be targeted to what a parent is currently doing. So they could be at the doctor's office or at the grocery store, or it's bath time, that sort of thing. Vroom provides tips that are targeted to the activities that they're currently doing. And so it's meant to be taking into account of the realities of parents' lives in terms of how busy they are. It also, I would stress that Vroom is written in a language at a level, particularly that is meant for everyone to understand. So the science behind it is dense in nature, but it's written in a level that everyone can understand. You don't have to be a scientist to understand what we call the brainy backgrounds behind the tips. Vroom is written in a way that's engaging for everyone. It's not meant to be exclusive or prohibitive for people with reading difficulties or language difficulties. Aiming for more and better rather than most and best. So I mentioned that it's meant to be additive. It's meant to be something that parents can layer onto what they're already doing, and not about being the best parent, but about giving them a tool to just do more with their kids. So I think you guys are starting to get a feel for this. It's meant to be positive. It's meant to be engaging on a level that everyone can understand, and to be additive and not corrective. And then meeting parents where they are. They found that it would be most effective to promote Vroom in a way that's going to reach them in their households, as opposed to just putting ads out there. And so one thing that we've done is, for instance, our licensing staff carries Vroom materials with them when they make visits to facilities. And pilot sites are bringing Vroom materials on their home visits, that sort of thing. So it's most effective and creates the most resonance when it reaches parents in their homes, as opposed to just simply an ad campaign. Celebrating identities that parents embrace. So whether it's teen moms or working moms, teen dads, working dads, Latinas, African Americans, Vroom is meant to embrace all different types of folks, and it's available in multiple languages. The material features people from all sorts of ethnic backgrounds, and we're working on translating the material into different languages as well, which I'll get into in a sec. But it's really meant to embrace and create a brand that reflects the character traits that parents of all backgrounds value, being independence, resourcefulness, and pride. And lastly, don't be afraid to talk about the science. The development process for Vroom was expansive and brought in some of the best minds from all of these fields. So the scientific background is strong, but it's written in a way, again, that's meant to be understandable by just about everybody. So we shouldn't be afraid of getting into the science. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but the why behind Vroom definitely matters. So those are the key principles that Vroom was sort of founded on. And now, again, if you have any questions or you're having any issues hearing me, go ahead and shoot me an email or a question or a chat note, but it looks like we're doing just fine. So we've talked about what Vroom looks like on the national scene and some of the outreach efforts for packaging and the other states that are active. I want to look now specifically at Oregon and what's happening here in our rollout strategy. So again, it's under the auspice of the Department of Education and the Early Learning Division specifically, but the work on the ground is happening with our pilot sites, and some of our pilot sites are currently on the phone right now, but we have 20 pilot sites here in Oregon now. We're aiming for more. And who are they? They are a number of different organizations that work with parents of young children. So these include early learning hubs. 11 of our 16 hubs across the state are pilot sites, Head Start programs, tribal groups, literacy initiatives, ESDs, library groups, library districts, I should say. And really, when we started promoting Vroom here in Oregon, we wanted to take a bottom-up approach and empower these local communities to share Vroom in their area with families, because we knew that they would have partnerships they could leverage, and they would know the communities better than we would on a statewide level. And so far, it's been very successful. So we've empowered these 20 pilot sites. What sort of support are they receiving? Each site receives federal Race to the Top grant funds, and these resources, including capacity funds and funding for materials, these Vroom materials that we'll get into in more detail soon, with the goal of helping them successfully implement Vroom as a sustainable part of their early learning efforts moving forward. And I'm really going to hammer on sustainability in this training because, you know, at a certain point for all of these sites, the grant funds will end. And we're having conversations about what funding will look like after that point. But for the pilot sites themselves, we really want them to emphasize those free materials, so the app and the materials that can be downloaded in hard copy form from the website. But also what's going to be most effective is building Vroom into their existing curriculum and programming. So whether that's using Vroom in parenting classes, home visits, therapy sessions, things like that will be most effective. Is building Vroom into what they're currently doing and utilizing their partnerships. And when we get into the case studies, you'll see how that can work on the ground level. But that sustainability point is really important for us. The ELD strongly believes in Vroom, and we really want it to last here in Oregon after this grant period ends. So something to keep in mind. Now, I mentioned that the pilot sites are doing the work on the ground. They're really the foot soldiers. And so while the state of Oregon is the grantor, the evaluator, and the coordinating entity for these sites, it's really the sites themselves that are driving the Vroom efforts in their communities and coming up with these creative ways to reach families. I want to stress that again. The pilot sites are the ones that are helping put the word out there. So if you are interested in spreading the word on Vroom and you are not a pilot site, I would really suggest that you take a look at the Early Learning Division's webpage, the Vroom section specifically, and see who those sites are and their representatives, and you can find the one that's in your region. They can help you get access to materials, find events that you can participate in related to Vroom. But the pilot sites themselves are great resources for those who are interested in putting Vroom out there. So let's talk about the science behind Vroom. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so we'll stay high level here. But I think that the key takeaways are really going to focus on sort of the immense amount of growth that happens in a child's brain during the years that Vroom is focused on, birth to 5, as well as the importance of back and forth interactions between parents and children and how Vroom helps facilitate that. So let's jump into the science of Vroom. We know that at birth, an infant's brain is the most immature organ in the body. So while the head is sort of disproportionately large, we know that there's an immense amount of growth that's happening inside of that head and in the brain. So a child's brain more than doubles in mass during the first year after birth and reaches 80% of its adult size by 2 years of age and 85% by age 3. So just an immense amount of brain development that's happening just in those first 3 years. And remember, Vroom has tips for those from birth to age 5. So during this period of immense growth, Vroom is there to provide tips that are age appropriate for all families. So now what helps determine this growth and influences it? We're talking specifically about the environment that the infant is in, as well as the quality of the relationships that that baby experiences. So immense amount of growth directly impacted by their environment and the relationships that they find themselves in. This is both an opportunity and a vulnerability in that it's an opportunity for parents to start things off on the right foot for their kids in terms of healthy cognitive development. Now, brain development itself, massive amounts of growth again, is sequential in nature. And so I have this image of a house, which is an analogy I'm going to be using again later on. And like building a house, we know that early brain development lays the foundation for all future development. And the quality of that early brain development carries forward and determines the quality of the brain development that follows. So without repair, an infant's brain develops, determines the quality of the brain development. Sorry, my apologies. So without repair, how an infant's brain develops sets the path for that child's development throughout the child's life. So it's incredibly important to start off on the right foot. So this is what is meant by the earliest years of brain development being both an opportunity to set in motion optimal development, as well as a vulnerability if the environment is not filled with quality relationships. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what those quality relationships imply. But first, the brain is sequentially developing in that neural circuitry. Those neural sort of connections are being made from the bottom up, like a house. And this happens even before birth. So this is a graph that's provided by the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, who was one of the sort of scientific contributors to Vroom. And what you can see here is the immense amount of growth that's happening in those first few years. And what we start with are sort of the sensory pathways, or those basic sensory abilities of vision and hearing. Now, we know that environment directly impacts this. So, for example, sort of an extreme example is that if a child is not exposed to light at an early age or at birth, they will develop blindness. So the environment can directly impact the child's development both positively and negatively. So those basic sort of sensory skills come into play. That development starts to taper off as language abilities come into play. And you guys, I'm sure, have heard that children at this young age are sort of they're sort of language geniuses. In a way, they're sort of sponges for this sort of information. In fact, at birth, babies have the capacity to learn all language sounds. So if you're having a kid, really it's those early years when you want to start to develop any multilingual capabilities. This language capacity starts to sort of taper off after about 6 to 8 months as higher cognitive functions come into play. Now, I want to point out the inset image on your right-hand side, and you can see that, like a house, the brain is developing not only from the ground up, but from the inside out, sort of culminating in the prefrontal cortex. And you can see that where the arrow is pointing, which is responsible for that higher cognitive function or executive function, so things like regulating behavior and mediating conflicting thoughts. So this neural circuitry that contributes to things like basic sensory abilities, language, and higher cognitive functions, these connections are being made at a very, very young age. So again, huge amounts of brain development, and in these incredibly crucial areas, really in the first 3 years. So how does attachment and human interaction play into that? Science tells us that human beings are social beings, hardwired for relationships with others, and that this really happens at birth. That babies are born seeking these human connections. So we know that at birth, a baby can identify their mother by smell. They're also able to imitate facial expressions at birth. And within a week after birth, an infant already recognizes their mother's face, which is usually pretty important because they depend on them for just about everything. Research has also shown that a 6-month-old is far more gifted than adults at picking out individual faces among a group of people. So they're more gifted than adults at making that sort of connection and identification. So we know that from birth, we're hardwired to seek those sorts of connections, and we learn from those connections. And really, the child's first teacher is their mother, their father, or their caregiver. And Vroom is a way to sort of expand on that relationship and expand on that interaction. I want to read a quick quote from one of our friends at the Oregon Health Authority on the importance of this relationship and the importance of this attachment for healthy development. They say, quote, "An infant must be in a nurturing and affectionate relationship with a caring adult for healthy social, emotional, mental, physical, and cognitive development." So you see the immense importance of relationships for healthy development. This is something that we are hardwired for and born into, and we learn from these relationships. So the question then becomes, how does Vroom play into this? And I'm going to talk or show a quick video about a concept called serve and return. And this is just a way of referring to those back and forth interactions and the importance that they play in healthy cognitive development. So I'm going to play a short video for you guys. It's about 2 minutes long, and again, this is from Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child. And I think you'll start to hear some common themes here, but give me just a moment.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
So, I'd recommend checking out the Center on the Developing Child's YouTube page. There's a lot of great videos like that. But what that video really stresses is the importance of those sorts of back and forth interactions for healthy cognitive development. Now, how does Vroom use this science? How does Vroom take that and package it in a way that families can really use to promote those brain building moments? I want to show you guys something called the Vroom Brain Building Basics, and this is a handout that's available to everyone. You can download it straight from the Vroom webpage. The only difference being that we added a little piece on the right-hand side showing sort of the scientific background of these brain building basics. Now, what the basics are 5 key for lack of a better word, basics that go into each Vroom activity and tip. So they're a functioning part of each Vroom activity or tip. And we start with look, number 1, which means making direct eye contact between the parent and the child, so you and your child are focusing on each other. The science behind that is that infants who follow a caregiver's eye gaze have larger vocabularies as toddlers. So that's one aspect of every tip. Number 2, talk about the things you see, hear, and do together, explaining what's happening. The science being when infants hear more parentese speech, quote, they babble more and have larger vocabularies. Follow. Take your child's lead by responding to their words and actions. You can ask questions like, remember when, or what do you think? So if you guys are familiar at all with these tips, this is starting to be very familiar in that each activity sort of encourages this back and forth dynamic in a number of ways. You're looking at them, you're chatting with them, you're asking questions, and number 4, you're stretching, so making each moment bigger by elaborating upon what your child does and says. For those in the education field, we're talking about scaffolding there. And we know that this leads to children with better language, problem solving, and cognitive skills. And lastly, take turns. So with sounds, words, faces, and actions, go back and forth to create a conversation or a game. I want to note something that, one thing that I hear from parents a lot is when they're just starting with Vroom is, my kid is too young to speak. They don't know words yet. They're not, speaking in full sentences. We can't have questions. They can't ask questions of me, that sort of thing. How will Vroom be appropriate? Well, we know, based on what I showed you before, that this brain development is happening, even before birth. So it's not about the necessity of having a full conversation with the child, but how about making eye contact? You can make sounds, you can coo, you can use hand signals, all sorts of things. It's just about that back and forth interaction that can really start at any age. So that's something that's important to keep in mind. So those are the Vroom brain building basics, which you might be familiar with, but they infuse all of the 1,000+ Vroom tips that are out there. Now, what does that look like in action? I want to talk about a specific brain-building activity from Vroom, and again, the app has over 1,000 of these. You can also find them on the Vroom website, as well as in the tip card version, the hard copy versions, but this is sort of what they look like. And this activity is particular to a parent or caregiver that is brushing their child's hair. And so when they're brushing their child's hair, they're talking to them, they're asking them to compare their hair to others. So asking questions like, who has hair that is curly like yours? Or who has hair that is the same color as yours? Or who has hair that is the same color as mine? So again, you've got eye contact, you're asking back and forth questions, you're stretching the conversation by asking follow-up questions, you're expanding on the time that you're already spending with their kid. What I would point out is you don't need fancy toys to do this activity. It's layered onto an existing activity that you're already doing, meaning that it's layerable for parents. And it's easy for them to do. The brainy background behind this, or the science behind this, is that back and forth conversation about their hair and how it compares to others teaches their child to pay attention to what they see, to use their memory, and to group things into categories. All important in the development of vocabulary and math skills. So you guys are starting to get a feel for how simple these tips are, how easy they are for parents to layer onto what they're doing, and the scientific background. So what does Vroom look like? Now for my pilot sites, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this material before, but just stay with me here. I'm going to be talking about the materials and the activities. Now for those who are working directly with parents, I'll show you an example of one of the Vroom activities in action, a video of one, so you can kind of see how simple it is to talk with parents about it and how simple it is for parents to actually use in the home. So let's start with sort of the low-hanging fruit, and that's the Vroom app. It's free for download. It's available in English and Spanish. It's customizable in terms of you specify the age of your kid, and then the app ages with them. So if you sign your kid up when they're 1, the next year they'll receive tips that are appropriate for a 2-year-old. The app actually downloads in the language that your phone is set in. Again, it has over 1,000 of these tips, and you can earn badges for every activity that you do, and the kids find it fun to earn these badges. It's sort of earning points as you go. So that's the app, but not everyone has smartphone access. Particularly, you have a lot of grandparents or caregivers, and they might be less inclined to want to use a smartphone. So for folks like that, we have hard copy materials. These include stickers, posters, flyers, tip cards, and again, like the app, many of these are free for download from the Vroom webpage in a high-quality format. So for those pilot sites who might have limited funds or are thinking about how to sustain what they're doing after the funds end, you can rely on resources like this. Or if you're just an individual who wants to promote Vroom, you can rely on the free app as well as these free for download materials. As I mentioned, they are available both in English and in Spanish. We are working on, and I can just confirm now that we've completed the translation of some of the most popular Vroom activities, including the tip cards, into Chinese, Russian, and Vietnamese. And the goal is to make those available within the next few months to all pilot sites. For the Early Learning Division, it is our goal to make Vroom accessible to all of Oregon's families, and we don't want it to be language prohibitive. So that's what the Vroom tools look like. Now I want to talk about what the Vroom brain building exercises look like. I want to show a quick video that details sort of a simple activity that a caregiver is doing with a child, and you can see sort of the simple props that are used. This is during mealtime here. So I'm going to play this quick video, and there are more videos like this on the Vroom YouTube page. Just give me 1 sec.
Vroom uses the latest scientific research to help parents and caregivers discover new ways to build children's brains. Science shows that the first 5 years of life are when the brain develops the fastest. Vroom turns mealtime, bath time, anytime into brain-building moments. Tip number 102, texture talk. Use household items to explore your child's sense of touch. Is this potato rough and bumpy? What about this banana? Is it smooth? Find other things to touch, like a cracker or dried beans. Ask questions about texture and shape.
How do they feel when you touch them?
Smooth. This one feels rough.
Do you know the name of this?
Avocado. Things like that. Blue.
No. And what's the name of this fruit?
Apple.
This one?
A banana.
A banana.
I'm a walking banana.
I'm gonna follow your banana.
No.
Here's the brainy background. Children learn from their senses, like their sense of touch. When your child explores her senses, like touch, you are helping her organize and explain her experiences. By letting your child come to her own conclusions, you are helping her think like a scientist. Every moment can be a brain-building moment. For more activities like this, download the free Daily Vroom app and visit us at joinvroom.org.
So again, there's more tips like that and more sort of visual representations of these activities on the Vroom YouTube page. But the key takeaway for me there is just how simple these activities are for parents to layer onto what they're already doing. You can see they're just using fruit in that instance, and they're getting a lot of fun and mileage out of that interaction. The part where she says, "I'm a walking banana," always cracks me up. So why don't we keep moving forward? I want to jump into some of our pilot sites and give you guys some case studies of how to promote Vroom in your community and some specific examples of what can be done. So let's start with the Marion and Polk Early Learning Hub, Inc. And I want to read, remember 11 of the 16 Early Learning Hubs are Vroom pilot sites, and this is one of them. I want to read a quote from their director or their Vroom coordinator, and she says that Vroom is part of their overall strategy to support and empower parents as their child's first teacher and as a brain builder. So community organizations are incorporating Vroom in a variety of ways. They're putting information in waiting areas, at community events, as part of orientation or registration. It is also being included as a part of group therapy sessions, home visiting, parent education, and more. So this is really a comprehensive implementation strategy. And I know they met early on with their partners and really asked the question of, who interacts with parents of young children and what would be the most effective way to put Vroom in front of them. So, they're the sort of easier ways of, putting information, putting posters up in waiting areas or having tip cards in waiting areas or handing out flyers at community events, which are great ways to reach parents. There also is sort of the more ingrained way of implementing Vroom in their programming. So they use Vroom, they have parents sign up for the Vroom app in their therapy sessions. They bring Vroom materials to their home visits, using them in their parenting classes, that sort of thing. And again, the ELD licensing staff, a lot of them carry Vroom materials when they visit child care facilities. So partnering with your community groups that work with parents of young children will be incredibly effective, and my job is to help you guys think through that process, as well as using your existing programming. And Marion and Polk have done a great job on that. When I talk about Central Oregon in just a second, we'll see sort of some similar examples. But this is what's going to help Vroom become sustainable here in Oregon, is layering it in to existing programming so that when a home visitor makes that visit, they're already pulling out their Vroom app, or parents know that during their parenting class they're going to be using Vroom as a tool. That's what's going to be most effective. A few other things that they've done, the Marion and Polk Early Learning Hub, to promote Vroom they've done some social media stuff. So they've created Facebook ads and used the analytics to do some targeted outreach. They also did some electronic billboards. I want to feature these because I think the design work that they did looked really great. But for those pilot sites who might have just a little bit of funding or limited time to promote, or you're just an individual who's looking to get Vroom out there, social media and web pages are really a cost-effective way of bringing parents to Vroom and spreading the word, whether it's in your community or in your family or with your friends, that sort of thing. We're really hoping that you guys will work with us to get the word out there, and there are a lot of cost-effective ways that can be done. A few other things that this pilot site did were they created a promotional video for Vroom that they showed at the beginning of movies at a local independent theater, which I thought was really cool. They ran those digital billboards over the holiday season and included their hub's logo, so they were targeted in their approach. They did their social media and online marketing, which is cost-effective and affordable for pilot sites and individuals. They also created some bilingual material that they could use with their partner organizations, including schools and local businesses. So, at the doctor's office, if a parent is waiting there with their kid and they're trying to pass the time, they see a Vroom poster with an activity or tip cards, they can use that. It's a really effective way to leverage existing partnerships. Another group that's done, I think, a really good job of promoting Vroom is Early Learning Washington County. We're running a little short on time, so I'm not going to show this video, but they created several PSAs, an English one and a Spanish language one, using a script that we helped develop with them to talk about Vroom. And you can see the lady who's narrating is wearing a Vroom t-shirt there, which are also available for our pilot sites. But they leveraged a partnership they had with a local community access TV program to get the word out there. So again, leveraging local partnerships to spread the word. They also did some targeted outreach with some bench ads. I want to read a quote from their pilot site representative in that, in terms of the location of the ad, they put it close to a WIC office and across from a large apartment complex, with the goal of advertising to their target audience of parents with young children. So they were very selective in terms of how they spent their funds and where they put their ads, and they found them to be really effective. So I hope I'm giving you guys an idea for some of our new pilot sites of how you can get the word out there. You can do it at events, you can do it in your programming, whether it's parenting classes, therapy sessions, all that sort of thing. You can use social media, your website, ads out in public, that sort of thing. There are a number of ways to get the word out there. I want to talk now about Early Learning Hub of Central Oregon, which has really done an excellent job of implementing Vroom into its existing programming. And they have been great in terms of thinking sustainably about Vroom and how to maintain it after those grant funds. And so they've incorporated as part of their parenting classes, their Head Start program, their Relief Nursery, their special education programs. And I want to talk particularly about what they've done with their WIC program. And they developed, what I think is sort of a brilliant sort of approach here. And for those who don't know, WIC is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. So what they did was they took Vroom tips related to snacking and food. So what you see on the right-hand side, you've got your snacky shapes and your salty sweet showcase, which I really love those titles. And then they included those tips in bags with healthy snack options. And these were available at their WIC offices. So it's a partnership with an existing organization that you know works with parents of young children. You made it topical for them, and they made it fun. And so I think that this is just a really excellent example of how to layer Vroom into your existing programming. But again, that's what's going to make it sustainable. So hopefully this has given you guys a couple of good suggestions on what you can do. Again, my job is to help you guys identify partnerships or other means of getting the word out there. So think about it in terms of layering and sustainability. Now, those are some examples of, we started with the national look, then we boiled down to what does Vroom look like on the statewide level, and then lastly, we talked about what our pilot sites are doing. There's any number of outreach opportunities and ideas we could get into, and there's more that those pilot sites I talked about are doing, but because we have limited time, I want to move forward to some key talking points when working directly with parents and caregivers. So if you're on our licensing staff and you're on the call, or you lead parenting classes, that sort of thing, hopefully this will be helpful. So how do I talk about Vroom? Well, the first thing I note is that what we know is Vroom positively impacts families. There's a number of ways we know this. I want to read a quote from our Early Learning Hub of Central Oregon, again, one of our all-stars here. That quote is that a young at-risk father that completed the series told us at its conclusion that he was so grateful to have been introduced to Vroom that he, quote, "It has enriched the time I spend with my daughter." And we're starting to get reports from our pilot sites which are giving us tons and tons of feedback like this, where parents are finding that it's really enriching and adding to the time that they're already spending with their kid. Another example that we can give is up in King County, where that original pilot site was. They did a study of parents that have been exposed to Vroom and found that over time they reported higher levels of interaction with their kid, as well as more direct eye contact made on a daily basis as a result of being exposed to the Vroom program. So we know that Vroom works, and the science behind it is sound, and it's based in really sort of the research of some of the top minds in the field. Now, what about some key talking points? I talked earlier about that immense amount of growth, and that's one thing that I hit on first. So your child's brain develops more rapidly during the first 5 years of life than at any other time. And during those first 2,000 days, their brain is being built based on their experiences and interactions like a house. Remember, it's being built from the ground up, and it's highly dependent on the environment that they're in and the interactions and the relationships they have with their parent or caregiver. This is a wonderful opportunity for parents to play an important role in supporting this brain development. And we want to be positive about it. Remember, that's one of Vroom's key principles, is being positive about this opportunity. It's additive. Vroom was created to help you make the most of those moments that you already share with your child and to support you on your brain building journey. So it's meant to be added on to those moments of bath time, brushing their hair, you're at the grocery store, you're at the doctor's office, that sort of thing. It's meant to add on to those existing moments and being about more and better as opposed to most and best. And lastly, we know it's based on the latest early brain development research and was designed to layer onto existing routines. In fact, what we stress is that parents already have what it takes to be a brain builder. And there's a really great video that I'm not going to show just because we're running low on time, but I would really highly suggest, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure most of the people on the phone have, checking out this Everyone Has What It Takes to Be a Brain Builder video on the Vroom YouTube page, which really is a sweet video of parents sort of reacting sort of for the first time to that idea that they already have what it takes to be a brain builder. And Vroom and the ELD really strongly believes in this message. And we are promoting Vroom very hard. We want it to last. We want it to become ingrained in your guys' communities. And hopefully the trainings have helped in that, you now sort of have a solid understanding of what the Vroom initiative is, what it looks like, the science behind it, at least the basics, and some tips on how to share it in your community. And we really hope that you guys will join us in our efforts of expanding Vroom here in Oregon. Again, we've got 20 pilot sites that cover geographically the entirety of the state, but there's a lot more work to be done. So that is my presentation. We have a few minutes left. If anyone has questions, they can feel free to email me or submit it in the question box on their screen, and I will take that. But I'm going to leave the line open for a few more minutes to take any questions that come in. If you think of something later, feel free to email me. My email's at the bottom of the page, or if you need any assistance in your community, or you're an individual that wants more information on Vroom, I'm happy to provide that. So I'll leave the line open for another few minutes to take any questions that come in.